Welcome to her forbidden tales, where secrets unravel. Eliza's gaze burns for Vivian's silken skin, then Nate's golden allure tempts her. What forbidden desire will she unleash? Dive in now. Chapter 3. Bound by First Sight. The weather was warm enough to make my head spin, yet the ground was crowded. As I hurried to my room, I could hear the persistent hum of loud conversations echoing through the hollow corridor. There was no time now for a quiet drink or a stroll in the garden, not even time to watch them herd the slaves off the yacht. In an hour, the slaves would appear at the hall's inspection point, and I hadn't even finished reviewing their files. Every slave came with a full description, background, comments, and all, bundled together with detailed photographs. I'd learned to study the slaves themselves as much as their dossiers. The moment I opened the door, I saw Vivian waiting for me. She wore no adornments, her hair loose and flowing, just the way I liked her best. Some trainers believed that a slave with a subtle, clever little ornament appeared more exposed. I disagreed. In a room like ours, with thick carpets, ancient velvet drapes, and all the small trappings of civilization, a naked slave burned like a flame. Amid the shifting muted tones, the glowing screens, and the low carved furniture, Vivienne radiated pure animality, an infinite mystery only a human creature could embody. Place her in a room as ostentatiously decorated as mine, among Haitian paintings, potted ferns, and savage stone carvings, and you had something rich and ripe, something that could smell fragrance where there was none, and taste the smoky, salty flesh the moment you laid eyes on her. Nothing compared to that moment, discovering her there for the first time. No matter how many slaves I'd seen in the halls and gardens, it was her swaying, heavy breasts, the damp triangle of her pubic hair, waiting for my command. Vivian was always like a dancer, sleek and lean, her snow-white hair cascading over elegant shoulders and down her back. Her face, though, was something else, entirely captivating. Full lips that almost pouted, the roundest, most expressive eyes I'd ever seen. But what truly stirred me was her French accent. I'd tried to dissect it, to understand its effect, to grow accustomed to it. Yet, it remained one of her fierce, indefinable qualities. I couldn't sweep her into my arms and kiss her. There was no time to start any of it. A stack of manila folders sat before the white computer screen on my desk. Everything was digitized, but I still liked holding the photos and drafts in my hands. I always asked for the physical files, no matter how primitive they seemed. "Open the window, darling," I said. "Yes, Eliza," she replied. The Bombay gin waited, the glass already chilled with ice, the lime freshly cut. Bombay was the only gin I could drink straight. No mixers, ever. From the corner of my eye, I watched her move with that same feline speed and grace, her slender hands reaching out slowly, as if they adored the rope that pulled the heavy purple drapes. For 3 years, she'd lived within these walls, as the saying goes, 6 weeks of vacation each year, and she'd vanish. I'll admit, I didn't know where she went, what she did, or what she was like during that time. Rumors said club members had offered her movie contracts, arranged marriages, or luxurious private lives in exotic lands. But that wasn't unusual for slaves here. It's one reason we had them sign on, stay for a while, and paid them so well. Once, I saw her dressed for vacation, arm in arm with another slave, heading toward a waiting plane. They said 5 of them had pooled their money to rent a castle in the Swiss Alps. In snowy weather, Vivian had worn a fur-trimmed white coat and a matching cap. She looked Russian, a towering ballerina among dwarves, striding confidently across the tarmac, chin lifted, her French lips pursed as if always ready for a kiss. But I didn't know that Vivian, I only knew her as the naked, submissive slave who served me day and night. She was perfection, if such a thing existed, and in the undisturbed quiet of certain nights, I often told her so. Sunlight poured through the French windows, the leafy branches of a California pepper tree veiling the summer sky like a shroud. The sky was too clear. The faint chime of wind bells drifted in from the garden, and a cluster of clouds racing south vanished in an instant. She crouched near me, and I reached out, my fingers sliding over her breast. Perfect, not too large, feeling her kneel there in silent surrender. Her hips rested on her heels, just how I liked it. Her eyes, looking down, were wet. "Speak freely," I said, starting to sort the files. "Were you good while I was gone?" "Yes, Eliza. I tried to please everyone, Eliza," she said. I took the glass from her hand, pausing for a few agonizing seconds to let the gin chill, then swallowed a deep, cold gulp, letting the instant warmth spread through my chest. Her posture was feline, poised to leap, arms ready to circle my neck. I could hardly resist her like that, but I hadn't shaken off the anxiety of the holidays. It felt like we were still circling in the sky. I stepped forward, making a faint, indescribable gesture to signal it was fine. She rose in her kneeling pose, pressing herself against me, tenderness incarnate. I turned and kissed her full, pouting lips. I could see the sensation pierce her, coursing through her limbs, her nakedness offering everything. Did she sense the stiffness in my body? She frowned, her lips parting. Then I released her. "No time now," I whispered. Yes, I had to tell her that. She was as well trained as any slave I'd ever had, but there was a tenderness between us that excited her, just as that cold distance always brought her to tears. I switched on the computer display, typing preview quickly across the white plastic keys. A string of silent, glowing green letters flashed across the screen. 50 new slaves. I stared at the number, startled. I'd met 30 of them at the auctions, but 20 had been sold independently. All 2-year contracts. So, our new rules and regulations were working. I hadn't expected it so soon. I'd thought, honestly, that some 6-month or 1-year slaves might bog us down, released just as they hit their peak. We needed 2 years to train a slave and recoup the investment, but many weren't ready for that. Now it was time to see the goods. Each file's cover bore an enlarged photo of a slave. I flipped through quickly, tossing aside 6, 7, 10, all beauties. Someone would love them, torment them, but not me. But here was a striking woman, strands of brown hair in natural curls, an oval American face. I eased away from Vivian, guiding her body downward, her arms wrapping around my waist. I felt her marvelous weight against me, her forehead resting on my stomach, my right hand stroking her hair. She trembled. She was always jealous of the new slaves. Her breasts felt hot. I could almost feel her heart pounding. "Did you miss me?" I asked. "Terribly, Eliza," she said. Clara Donovan, I recalled from a file. Tall, according to the stats, 5'6", intriguing to handle. High IQ, a master's in journalism, well-traveled, a TV weather girl in LA, a talk show host in San Francisco for a spell, trained in Bel Air by a Parisian named Isabelle Moreau at a private club. I didn't know the trainer, but we'd gotten good stock from Moreau before. I flipped back to the photo. "Did you work hard?" I asked. I deliberately allowed Vivian to work. She needed it. Maintenance wasn't enough. "Yes, Eliza," she said, her voice shifting suddenly. I lifted her hair from the nape of her neck. Her body was warm. I knew the hair between her legs was soaked. The brown-haired girl in the photo was a classic American beauty, the kind you'd see in a Playboy centerfold. Perfect weather girl, no doubt. I could picture her on the nightly news. Round eyes, big like Vivienne's, but with a worldly air her delicate frame couldn't hide. Yet her face radiated sharp intelligence, a curiosity barely concealed. A healthy American girl with cheerleader breasts, one to inspect closely. I sipped the gin, working quickly, flipping the hardcovers back into place. Vivian kissed me. "Quiet," I said, staring at a man's photo. Blonde, 6'2", according to the stats. But as I studied the image, I couldn't understand my reaction, why it hit me so hard, unless it was the expression on his face. They rarely smiled in these photos, staring straight ahead as if posing for a mugshot. Sometimes their weakness showed right there, a flicker of fear. They were about to be confined, unsure of what awaited, perhaps a total mistake. But this one smiled, or at least hinted at pleasure, a touch of wit. Thick blonde hair, almost curling, falling slightly over his forehead, framing his ears and neck beautifully. Gray eyes, or maybe blue, behind large glasses like faint rings of smoke, casting the slightest shadow at the top, leaving the lenses clear above his cheekbones. And that smile. He'd worn a black pullover for the shot, arms crossed, not at his sides. A relaxed pose. I flipped to the back for his nude photos, leaning back to study them, sipping my gin. "Look at these," I said. Vivian lifted her head as I showed her 2 shots. "A handsome one," I whispered, tapping Nathaniel Nate Carver's photo. I shifted to grab ice, pouring more gin. "Yes, Eliza," she said, lacing her words with a hint of hurt, refilling my glass as if the gesture carried immense weight. I kissed her again. In the nude shot, he stood with hands at his sides, but that same faint pleasure lingered, clearly trying to hide it, maybe told not to smile. An astonishing presence radiated from the image. No pose, no imagined self-image shielded him. A flawless body, a true Californian body, muscles honed by regular exercise, strong calves, not overdeveloped, tanned from real beach time. Nathaniel Nate Carver, Berkeley, California, 29. Trained in San Francisco by Julian Wentworth. Interesting, my hometown. And Julian Wentworth, the world's best trainer, my dearest friend. A little mad, perhaps, but aren't we all? At 20, I'd worked in Julian's Victorian house in San Francisco, 15 dimly lit, exquisitely furnished rooms, a universe as vast and mysterious as the club. It was Julian who'd built the sunroom for the slaves, complete with little bikes and exercise machines they'd pedal as punishment. Only a Californian, even one as pale as Julian, would think of such wholesome equipment. But when Julian Wentworth and the mansion existed, there was no club. In a way, the club owed its existence to me and to him, or rather, to the money he'd backed it with. Julian had chosen not to come with us. He could never leave San Francisco or the mansion. I flipped to Julian's handwritten report. He loved to write. This slave is highly sophisticated, financially independent, possibly wealthy. Despite broad interests, he's utterly committed to becoming a slave. Broad interests. A PhD in English literature from UC Berkeley, my old alma mater. He deserved a Purple Heart for that. Not as high an IQ as Clara Donovan, but impressive nonetheless. A freelance photographer, rock stars, celebrities, war shots for Time and Life. 2 published photo books. Beirut, 24 Hours, and San Francisco Playground, Scan. Owned a gallery in the Castro, a bookstore in Berkeley. Which one? I knew them all. No specifics. Drawn to danger. Dangerous solo sports. Unusual. Just like his face. I checked the time. 45 minutes until the slaves reached the hall. I'd chosen 2 already, I was sure. Either Claire Donovan or Nathaniel Nate Carver. I'd know once I saw Nate in person. If I didn't get first pick, I'd lose my mind. But I did have first pick. So why this sudden anxiety? A feeling I couldn't control something vital? To hell with it. I was off the plane. Vacation was over. I was home. I pushed the other files aside and kept reading Nate's dossier. This slave requested training of his own accord on August 7th last year. 9 months ago. Extraordinary for him to end up here. But Julian knew what he was doing. Opted for our most intensive program, refusing to work with masters outside the house, though after every group session, offers for masters came eagerly. Highly resilient and strong, requiring harsh punishment to leave an impression, yet easily humiliated in many situations, almost to the point of panic. This slave shows a subtle defiance, hard to detect unless... I stopped. I'd find that, out my way, with delicious pleasure. I skipped ahead a few pages, knowing Julian's style. This slave was briefly confined in a Marin County villa, found a full week's training grueling, but requested it almost immediately. Slept soundly after each session. During rest periods, read widely, classics, pulp, sometimes poetry. Obsessed with detective novels and James Bond thrillers, but devoured great Russian novels word for word. Too amusing? Who'd notice but Detective Julian? A romantic, yet after every session refused intimacy with any master, only asking for my future suggestions. Says he wants to face what he fears most. I studied the photo again. A square face, even square features, except the mouth slightly full. That smile could mean irony, a hint of disdain. There should be a word for that ruthless edge that isn't quite disdain. A nice face, somehow the opposite of disdain. God, 2 weeks ago, I might have passed him on a Berkeley street, seen him in a bar on... Don't be ridiculous, Eliza. You've reviewed 1,000 files from San Francisco slaves. There's no life beyond this island, right? This dossier, as you keep telling new trainers, should be useful here. I turned to the training summary. Remarkably, after 2 weeks of rural training, this slave was sent back immediately. Out-of-town guests worked him relentlessly. The elderly Russian Countess Prue fell for him, see addendum, but he said he'd go elsewhere unless longer confinement was arranged. Money isn't his goal. He mentioned fearing younger masters, yet didn't ask to avoid them. Said, it's especially terrifying when someone weaker humiliates him. I flipped to the last page, sent with the highest recommendation, ideal for the club. But I must stress, he's a novice. Monitor him. I can vouch for his agility and mental stability, but he hasn't had much training. He passed the house manager's tests, female ones, but under stress, he clearly fears women more than men. Yet he refuses to discuss women, saying he'll do whatever it takes to join the club. Again, monitor him. He responds well to women, clearly aroused by them, but love stirs deep conflict in him. I doubted his duality. I rifled through the file until I found smaller photos. I was right. In a profile shot not facing the camera, Nate Carver looked stern, almost cold, a brooding face with something genuinely unsettling. Back to the smiling shot, utterly likable. I closed the file, skipping the addendum on masters and mistresses who favored him. God knows how much more Julian wrote. He should have been a novelist, or maybe he's exactly who he's meant to be. I sat there staring at the manila cover. Then I opened it again, gazing at Nate's photo. I felt Vivian beside me, her warmth, her need, and something else, a faint worry about my tension. I won't be back for dinner, I said. Get the brush now, and some cool Chanel to spritz my face. She moved to the dresser as I pressed a button on the desk. She kept the Chanel in a small fridge in the dressing room, bringing it wrapped in clean flannel. I dabbed the perfume on my cheeks as she brushed my hair. No one brushed like her. She knew how. Before she finished, the door opened. My favorite manservant, Miles, appeared. Good to see you back, Eliza. "We missed you," he said, glancing at Vivian. "Henry says the slaves will be at the hall in 45 minutes. He needs you. Something special." Terrible timing. "All right, Miles." I gestured for Vivian to stop brushing. I turned her body to face me, studying her. She bowed her head, white hair falling around her. "I'll be busy," I said. "I want Vivian to work." I felt her slight shock. Our most passionate moments always came after a separation. There'd be time near dusk, wouldn't there? She knew that, of course. "Count Victor Rostov is here, Eliza. He wants her. Was refused," Miles said. "Yes, dear old Victor. Wants to make her an international star, right?" "The very one," Miles replied. "Gift her to him. Tie her up nicely with ribbons, just like that." Vivian shot me a startled look, but her pout was beautiful. "If he doesn't need her right away, have her work the bar till late." "She hasn't offended you, has she, Eliza?" "Not at all. Just jet lag. I'm off after circling the sky for 2 hours. The phone rang. "Eliza, we need you in the office," Henry's voice said. "I just got in, Henry. Give me 20 minutes. I'll be there." I hung up. Vivian and Miles left. Silence. I took another long sip of cool gin and reopened the file. Nathaniel Nate Carver, Berkeley, California, trained in San Francisco by Julian Wentworth. Not just home, Berkeley, San Francisco. You went there for a special penance called a vacation. Number. They were milestones on a long journey that brought me to this island, this room. In a half daze, I seemed to remember, or rather, summon again, how it all began. And back then, there was no Julian Wentworth for me. I saw that first hotel room where I'd made love, if that's what you call it. I remembered the hazy, forbidden encounter, the smell of leather, the sweet abandon of letting go. Was any passion like that first one? How strange it was. The dreams beforehand, the endless hours imagining it. A ruthless master, a cruel one, a drama of punishment and submission, without real harm. Something I dared not describe to another living soul. Then meeting Declan, handsome like a romance comic boy, right in Berkeley's university library, blocks from my home. He casually asked about the book I was reading, a mad psychiatrist's account of a masochist's fantasies, proving, what? That someone like me existed, craving to be bound, disciplined, tormented in the name of love. Then that classic first date, his whispers in my ear. He said it was exactly what he wanted, and he knew how to do it well. He worked weekends as a waiter in a small, elegant San Francisco hotel. We could go there. "Just wherever you want," he said, my blood pounding in my ears. Kisses couldn't match that. Climbing marble stairs, I was terrified. We couldn't use the front lobby elevator. When he opened the dark little suite, we were like criminals. But it was what I wanted. Yes, the unfamiliarity. He was firm, in control, with the right timing, pace, and skill to wield them deftly. The passionate fire consumed everything faster because I barely knew who he was. Even now, I can't recall his face. Just that he was good-looking, young, healthy, like every Berkeley kid. And I knew that room, the street he lived on, but that passion, almost indescribable. We were like animals, crazed, total strangers to each other. A quiet, too serious high school girl, 16, a college boy, barely 2 years older, reading Baudelaire, spouting profound sensualities, smoking odd, pale Sherman cigarettes ordered straight from the company. He wanted what I didn't, with an identity and credible skill to do it. We made discordant, beautiful music. The danger? Was that the thrill? No, an ugly undercurrent, dispelled only at the night's end. Exhausted and silent, I followed him out of the hotel, slipping through a side door, knowing nothing terrible had happened, that he wasn't mad, relieved in a flash. Danger wasn't a spice, just a price I paid in those days. In the depths of the club, there was never that price. That was its essence, its gift, its reason for being. No one ever got hurt. I saw him twice more. Then he suggested meeting his friend Owen. One afternoon, the three of us together. Suddenly, the intimacy was gone. We weren't equals anymore. I grew afraid, didn't I? Inhibition hit me. He came with another friend, proposing again, and I felt betrayed. Then came long, painful nights, wandering San Francisco, searching faces passing by, peering into grand hotel lobbies, thinking, yes, somewhere, a man refined and experienced, a fresh start, someone infinitely smarter, more dignified, more careful than the first. Sitting by the home phone, a newspaper's personals column in front of me. Was it code for what I craved? Did I dare dial 2 numbers? Going through the motions, senior year prom, movie dates, muttering lies, excusing my coldness, my ruthlessness, that awful sense of being depraved, a secret criminal. Passing counters with leather gloves and glass cases, ominous despite white tissue in shallow boxes. Yes, I'd love those. Long, tight, black gloves, and a wide belt cinching my waist, a strange girdle. Yes, once I could afford it, black silk and calf-hugging boots. Finally, in a bookstore near Berkeley's campus, in silent suspicion and blushing excitement, I found that soul-shaking classic, known to others for years, its glossy white cover so innocent. The Story of O. No, you're not alone. Paying for it, I felt every eye in the store on me. Yet I sat in the Mediterranean cafe, flushed, eyes glazed, flipping page after page, watching for anyone who'd noticed the book, comment, approach. I closed it only when I'd finished, staring through the open door at students hurrying down Telegraph Avenue in the rain, thinking, I won't live my life in fantasy. Not like this, even if... I never called Declan again. What shocked everyone wasn't a cryptic ad in an underground paper or loud sadist masochist chatter, but an innocent-looking notice in the San Francisco paper. Special announcement, Rossi Institute still accepting applications. So late, only someone familiar with the training would apply. Rossi, the fictional villa in The Story of O, where O was taken. No mistaking it. But you won't use a whip. I mean, something that really hurts, causes intense pain. I whispered on the phone. We discussed arrangements, a meeting at a San Francisco hotel, how we'd recognize each other. No, darling, Vincent Duval said. No one does that, except in books. Oh, those long-awaited moments were pure agony, and those secret hopes and dreams. When Vincent rose from the table at Enrico's, he exuded European flair. Velvet jacket, narrow collar, like a handsome, dark-eyed French actor from a Visconti film in my memory. A truly sensual American woman. What a treasure, he said as I finished my coffee. But why waste time here? Come with me. Yes, agony, that's the word. So young, so compelled, so startled. Some pagan angel watched over me in those days, didn't it? But my mental clock sounded a silent alarm. Henry was waiting. Less than half an hour until the new slaves reached the hall's inspection point. Now we were the pagan angels.